What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Game Script. Joined by Meg Shoup of FanSpeak today. And last time we were on a show together, we talked about how the NFC was ripe for an upset. And in the conference championship that we're going to break down today between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders, we have a number 6 seed versus number 2 seed. And Meg is a huge fan of the Commanders, and I'm a big fan of the Eagles. And I'm going to get into it with Meg right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports. You're watching Game Script. We're about to break down the Washington Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles in the conference championships. We got a 47.5 point total with Philadelphia as 6.5 point favorites in this one. I happen to think that's way too high, and I'm joined by Meg Shoup of FanSpeak. And Meg, what's going on? What do you have going on over at FanSpeak?
Well, at FanSpeak, we're really excited because we came off a very successful best ball season. My brother placed 4th in the big board, which is going to be releasing here soon on Underdog Fantasy. I placed 5th in the Bulldog. We both, had some finals appearances and had a really good best ball season. So we're excited. We're starting best ball content literally next week. And I think the big board will probably be released the week of, February 2nd, that week of the Super Bowl. So we're starting our best ball content, right then. And then we'll eventually probably in early spring have a best ball subscription. That'll be really fun. And so we're gonna have a lot of best ball offerings right from the jump, and we couldn't be more excited to get back in the best ball streets.
That's great. Yeah, Meg's always great at best ball. Love having her on the show to do best ball content in the off season, and I'm sure we'll be doing plenty of shows this year. And
Definitely.
it's going to be a good season because we have a lot of good quarterbacks coming up. We got some interesting things happening in the draft, and Meg and her brother cover all that over at FanSpeak as well with some of their offerings. So you want to check out FanSpeak to make sure to get involved in that and check out all the cool content and all the offerings that they have over there. For today's show, we're going to be breaking down DraftKings Showdown lineups for this conference championship game between the Eagles and the Commanders. And Meg, I want to get your take on this first. Like, what do you think about this game going into this weekend? And what's your general feel for how you think a game script might play out between these two teams?
Well, first of all, it's just wild that we're here as Washington fans. Haven't had this feeling since the early 90s. And yes, unfortunately, I am old enough to remember that. I actually am old enough to remember 2 of the 3 Washington Super Bowl wins. But without dating myself too much further, so excited to be back in the conference championship. With that said, I do think it's an uphill battle for Washington. I know they pulled off a massive upset last week against Detroit and an upset against the Buccaneers in the wild card round. But, this is going to be really tough. I think outside of a couple position groups, Philly is definitely a by far much better team, kind of position by position and all around, I'd say. So, it's going to be an uphill battle for Washington, but what we like is they're scrappy. They're not afraid to go against anybody. They're fearless, obviously. And, that kind of does make them dangerous and live. But, with that said, I do see Eagles winning here at home and moving on to the Super Bowl, but I'm hoping, Washington makes it close and maybe gives us something to root for.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting game. Like when we see these two teams play against each other, obviously we get to see them play twice a year, being in the same division. And the scores are usually, at least recently, they've been super high. And some of the scores that we've had recently, we had, Washington beat Philly in the second game of the season this year, 36-33. The game before that was 26-18. We've had 38-31, 34-31, 32-21. Just a lot of high scores between these two teams. It's a pretty good rivalry, and we're looking at two teams obviously with a lot of offensive weapons. Philly's D has been really good this season, but we're looking at some injuries on that defense, which might set up Washington to be able to take advantage of that, on top of Washington being super aggressive on fourth downs. Eagles tend to be more conservative, and I think that that's going to be an edge for the Commanders. I happen to think that the Commanders have a head coach edge with Quinn versus Sirianni. I think Sirianni's a goofball. I've talked about that on the show a lot of times, but I do like the coordinators over on the Philly side. But I do like how Kingsbury's been playing or been coaching too over on Washington's side. So I think it's kind of a, like a wash to a little bit of an edge for Washington on the coaching side. And then I think, like, as far as talent and the players, like Jaden Daniels has been playing way better than Jalen Hurts lately. And I think that is going to be a threat for this dinged up Phillies defense, who Meg and I were talking before the show. We're missing Nakobe Dean on that defense, and that's going to set up a couple players for big games in this one, we believe. And before I get into that, make sure to hit the like button. We're looking for 30 likes so I can put out my favorite picks in the comment section when we get closer to lock. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. I'm looking towards 1,700 subscribers. I need about like 80 to get there. I want to get there by the end of the conference championship. So if you guys can help out with that, that'd be great. And Meg, let's take a look at the player pool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that I like to do before we get into it is kind of check out the injury report here. And if we're looking at the Eagles, like we were talking about, right before we jumped into the screen share, Nakobe Dean is, let's see, waiting for it to come up here. Nakobe Dean's on IR, so he's out on this one. Quinion Mitchell looks like he's not on the injury report anymore, but he got dinged up in that last game against Los Angeles, and it was looking like for like a minute there that he might be questionable. But him being hurt or potentially hurt is going to be good for Terry McLaurin in this one. And Terry McLaurin's kind of had like ups and downs in this matchup. You've seen like 17 points in the last game. He had 2 points in the previous matchup. But Meg, what are your thoughts here on Terry McLaurin if we happen to see this injury be real with Quinion Mitchell?
Terry's my favorite player. I love Terry McLaurin so much, but he has struggled, in this, I'd say in this matchup, typically. And this year, like you said, the first game was really held in check, totally shut down. Kingsbury, I've gone, kind of a roller coaster with him this season, but overall he's done an excellent job. Obviously Jaden Daniels is playing outstanding. But honestly, Kingsbury's done an outstanding job with the talent he has. Cause think of who the Washington receivers are outside of Terry McLaurin. He was rolling with Noah Brown for a while, then Zacchaeus, now Diame Brown has emerged. I mean, these are not really good receivers outside of Terry. And so, I'd love to think that Terry can have a big game here. I kind of like the other Washington cheaper pieces a little bit more, mostly. And I know we'll get to it, Zach Ertz and Eckler more underneath. I think, the one injury for Washington that's a big concern is Sam Cosmi, the right guard. He was our best offensive line offense. And that's another point to Kingsbury. Kingsbury has the offensive line has massively kind of overplayed expectations. Obviously, the whole offense, it has overplayed expectations. I talked about how the receiver group, what he's doing with that receiver group, incredibly impressive. But Sam Cosmi was the best offensive line. It has been the best offensive lineman of the season. And he's now, out on IR with a torn ACL. So that's a massive loss. And especially coming up the middle with Jalen Carter. There's going to be more pressure for Jaden Daniels this week. I think obviously Philly brings the pressure, has a great defensive line and brings the pressure anyways, but now you lose that piece. That's more pressure. So that's why I could like those quick passes, underneath passes, potentially Ertz and Eckler a little bit more than paying up for Terry, even though I'd love to think that Terry has a big game.
Yeah. And I like those plays too, just with Nakobe Dean being out on top of that. Let's get into to Eckler a little bit here. What are you thinking here with Austin Eckler this week?
Yeah, so In their recent matchup, the one that Washington scored a ton in the fourth quarter and Jaden Daniels threw 5 touchdown passes, they came back to win because they were playing from behind pretty much that whole entire game. Again, this was against Hurts goes out early. It's against Kenny Pickett. Saquon still runs for 2 touchdowns, playing massively from behind, but Jaden Daniels throws 5 touchdowns. Washington wins at the end. Eckler's out for that one. He did play in the one where Washington was playing from behind again. The first matchup had 8 receptions for, I believe, 89 receiving yards. So I don't think we can expect much of either running back on the ground, but I think Eckler will be used. I know in the prop market, I'm very interested in his alt receiving yards because I think it could be similar. I'm not maybe saying 89 yards, but I think it could be similar to that. Just getting a lot of targets and racking up receiving yards. And then if he falls in the end zone, then I think he could be a great play.
Yeah, I like Eckler too. I kind of like Robinson too because Nakobe Dean had a like his run block grade was like an 83 or in the 80s, like for PFF grade. So or his run defense or whatever you want to call it. But like he was really good for defending the run and probably like a major part of why they've been successful this season. And for him to be missing, I think that sets up the running backs pretty well. And Meg adding on to that with the potential for Jaden Daniels to be trying to get rid of the ball quicker, that definitely lends more to Austin Eckler in this one. And I like that play as well. He's been doing well recently too. Had the concussion, came back, and since he's come back from the concussion, he's been a decent part of the passing game here. So I like
great in his touches last week in Detroit.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. And Ertz was the other guy. Ertz also in a revenge game.
Yeah. I think he's not such a big fan of Sirianni too. So yeah, definitely a revenge game there.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see Sirianni getting under people's skin, and we saw it like in what was the post game, Meg?
Yeah, they had some like post game dust up or something, and and then afterwards, Ertz just said, "Oh, we're both uber competitive," and downplayed it. But yeah, I'm guessing not a total fan because Ertz left, I think, early in Sirianni's time to go to Arizona. So yeah, no, I think there's definitely a little revenge narrative there for sure.
Yeah, we were looking at 2.2 points, DraftKings points in that last game. So Sirianni probably said something stupid when they were passing each other. Ertz took the high road on that one, but like you look at their first game, he scored 18.7 DraftKings points in that first game. So you can only imagine like the connection that him and Jaden Daniels has. Like if they have an opportunity to connect in the end zone this week, like Zach Ertz is going to be scoring a touchdown this week, just to stick it to Sirianni if for nothing else on top of winning a playoff game,
Yeah, And Jaden's really been looking Ertz's way in the end zone, in the red zone. A ton of red zone targets really all season, high up in tight end red zone targets. But then in these I want to say in like the last 7 games, 9 touchdowns. I know in week 17 against the Falcons had 2 touchdowns. I know because he helped me in my best ball finals. But no, he's really been a really big red zone target for Jaden Daniels, especially the stretch run, these last 7 or 8 games.
Yeah, and he's cheap too at that 7,800 salary. So Ertz is going to be a good piece for us because we got a lot of expensive guys that we want to try to get in our lineups potentially. And we kind of lead that off with Barkley. Barkley it's going to be an interesting situation with Hurts having a knee injury. I was looking at Dr. Chow's Twitter. He did some analysis of some of the tape of Hurts at practice. He was favoring the knee that got banged up. So we can expect potentially more runs for Barkley, as if you could have more runs for Barkley, but also maybe some more passing to Barkley if Hurts can't scramble as much and he needs to dump the ball off. But we've seen, look at these attempts by Barkley. We got 26, 25, 31, and 29.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's going to be more of the same. We know both games against Washington, I believe he had about 150 each, a $1.50 each game. People are, joking about his line is so high in the 130s, rushing line is so high in the 130s, but he got, 150, I think 148 one game, 150 in the low 150s in the other game, 2 touchdowns in each game. So you're talking about 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in the 2 games against Washington this year. I mean, we saw even in the playoffs, even winning both of these playoff games, it took a while, but Bucky Irving got it going against Washington, and Gibbs just ripped them to shreds last week on the ground. I mean, it felt like he was going for like 9 yards a clip last week. Honestly, Lions probably should have run him even more because, and you could say, I know people say, well, they're going to sell out to stop Barkley. Well, it's not like they probably weren't trying to do that the other 2 times. And it's not like everybody else hasn't tried to do that. I think, at this point of the season, Barkley's had a historically good season. We know how powerful he is for the Eagles, yet nobody seems to be able to really do it. I think Washington was able to do it in the second half because Kenny Pickett was playing. So to that point, if Hurts shows no threat on the ground or no threat as a passer, that's where it may become more difficult for Barkley. But if he shows any threat on the ground, any threat as a passer, then they're going to have to respect that. And that's going to, kind of open the lanes for Barkley. And, the Eagles have such an amazing offensive line. So that in itself will open lanes for Barkley. So I still love Barkley here, even though he's obviously going to be the highest priced, highest owned.
Yeah. And I think Barkley, from a raw point perspective, he's most likely to, score the most points in this one, even if Washington slows him down to let's say like 18, 19 DraftKings points, that's still probably going to be, something that you need in the optimal this week. So, Barkley is going to be really tough to fade. I don't think you need him in the captain. I think that, Meg and I have some good ideas on where we can go in the captain, but, I think he's going to be the most popular captain option just based on that. And to Meg's point about stacking the box, like Barkley had an interview talking about how he likes it when the box is stacked against him because it like leaves openings when you hit your gap. There's not as many people to stop you downfield. So he actually prefers it when the box is stacked. But the thing with Hurts, being hurt, like he's that's going to make things a lot easier for I think the defense to kind of put more effort into at least slowing Barkley down. And Hurts has not shown like a lot of greatness in the passing game recently. He hasn't been so great, but I think part of that might be because AJ Brown is hurt, or there's something wrong with AJ Brown. I think there's some kind of a injury situation with him. He has not been very good as a receiver recently. We're looking at 7 targets, 2 receptions last week against the Rams, who was a good matchup for him. 3 targets, 1 reception against Green Bay. That was a game that Philly controlled from the first play of the game, basically with Green Bay fumbling. So Brown really wasn't needed too much in that game, but we're not seeing a whole lot of, outstanding performances from him, beyond that the last few weeks. So we've had a couple, 28 and 23 point performances, and that's when I think the squeaky wheel was needing to get greased a little bit. Prior to that, like he really has had a down year. And if he's hurt, like there's been speculation, then that's not going to be good for the passing game this week. But there's also like a situation, Meg, with the Commanders adapting their defense to opponents in these playoffs. Are you familiar with that? Like how they've been adjusting their playing more zone against offenses that do better against man coverage, and just kind of adapting their defense like they normally would not do during the regular season.
Yeah, I do think they adapted, especially against Detroit last week. I always read, shout out to Rich Rebar, Sharp Football Analysis, and he breaks it down like, what percent they're playing at man or zone and what the other team's better at. And Washington did seem to adjust. I know AJ Brown is definitely excels against man coverage, I believe, right? So It'll be interesting to see. And I think I want to say they played more man coverage the last time, I don't know, whatever it was, I think, and maybe on the Eagles side, I could see adjustments by both defenses, because obviously we saw how it was a very high scoring affair the last time these two teams played. I could see the defenses both adjusting, quite honestly, to whatever they did last time, because whatever they did last time for both teams didn't really work very well on the defensive side of the ball. So I could see both defenses adjusting, quite honestly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Dan Quinn in this defense plays, AJ Brown, Hurts, Saquon, schematically, for sure.
Yeah. And I think if that happens where Hurts, he can't run, he can't scramble, that slows down Barkley a little bit, and they're playing more zone coverage against the Eagles, then that's going to set up Smith and Goddard for decent games. Goddard, we talked about already. I think we talked about it on the air, Meg, where Commanders.
We definitely talked about it pre-show. I'm not sure if we talked about it on the air or not.
Yeah, because Commanders have given up 9 touchdowns to tight ends this season, and a lot of those tight ends were scrubby tight ends, and they missed some of the better tight ends in their matchups. Trey McBride was not active when they played the Cardinals. So, they really have struggled against tight ends this season. We saw Sam Laporta have a decent game against them. Same as the Eagles being, struggling against tight ends recently. They gave up something like 10 receptions to Tyler Higbee last week in an 18 DraftKings point game. So, Philly's been susceptible to tight end, and especially with Nakobe Dean being out now on top of that. So Devontae Smith, I think, would be another guy, who benefits from maybe the zone defense if they end up going that route. Right. But he tends to be, favored more in zone defense. At least gets more targets in that situation. So Devontae Smith, I think, would be in play if we decide we want to get away from AJ Brown. But what are your thoughts on Smith here?
Yeah, I agree that that's kind of a pivot off, potential game script, or like you said, or kind of thinking about like if Washington adjusts and does play more zone, because I think Hurts and AJ Brown are much better against man. So if they really adjust and play more zone, I agree with you that Goddard and Smith would be the two to benefit the most. So I definitely like that call out a lot. I mean, I've leaned to, it always feels like AJ Brown has big games against Washington, and even with Pickett, he had a pretty good game last time. So I still kind of lean AJ Brown, and you have to think if Philly's playing from ahead, you'd almost think, and confident that you're gonna move on to the Super Bowl, you'd almost think that they'd want to get him going into the biggest game. Knowing that if they aren't it's looking like they're going to make the Super Bowl, you'd have to think they'd want to almost get the squeaky wheel going into the Super Bowl too. So I like AJ Brown a little more, but I totally get the point for Devonta Smith, especially if they play more zone coverage.
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a look here at Jayden Daniels. I think, we pretty much know, what we're getting with Jayden Daniels. He's been a stud. We're seeing his games against Philly. He had 36 DraftKings points in one, 14 in the other, but like that 36 DraftKings point game is the one that I'm more interested in, because I think with the injuries to Philly's defense and the confidence that he's playing with right now, I think that we could see like a big game out of Jayden Daniels in this one. But what are your thoughts there, Meg?
Yeah, I mean, as a Washington fan, obviously, I hope so. I think he got a lot racked up. I mean, they were playing from behind a lot in both first and second half. So, he racked up a lot late. That's not to take anything away from him. He threw 5 touchdown passes. He also, I think, more of the rushing yards, maybe they were giving him a little bit of that, and playing a little, just in their coverages to kind of prevent massive plays. So he racked up 9 carries for 81 yards, but they held him really low rushing yards the first game. So hard to know what he'll do on the ground. He's certainly, I think, going to attempt to have a lot of runs. Hard to predict. I don't know. I guess that's my way of saying I'm not confident of his kind of the rushing side, but he's gotten, has thrown for 2 touchdown passes or more outside, the Dallas game where he only played a half. He's thrown for 2 touchdowns or more in the last, I believe, 6 or 7 games. So, I definitely think, Jaden Daniels should be fine here as a passer, even against this very vaunted Philly defense.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Taking a look down here. Let's take a look and see if we like any cheap guys. What are your thoughts on Diami Brown this week?
It's tough. It's like, Zacchaeus emerged and, first it was Noah Brown, then it was Zacchaeus, then it's Diami Brown. These guys are honestly just exceeding my expectations because there was not a lot for there to think any of these guys were going to emerge the way they have. But it has been two games in a row that Diami Brown's had, both the playoff games, which is weird because Zacchaeus had to end the season, 3 or 4 good games in a row. And then his routes have really tailed off and Diami Brown's have gotten much higher. So it's kind of oscillated as far as outside of Terry. I mean, I do have a lot of respect for the Philly secondary. I know Quinton Mitchell could be playing banged up, but I do have a lot of respect for the Philly secondary. So, I don't know what we think ownership on Diami Brown's going to be, but if he's going to be relatively high owned, that might be one I'd stay away from. And again, more leaning into the Ertz Ecklers.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Ertz Eckler leans. Kickers, I think kickers will be in play. I'm not really sure what the wind situation. I would imagine it's going to be pretty cold in Philly this week, and I do think that the kickers, could potentially be involved, at least on the Philly side. But the way that the Commanders have been aggressive on 4th down, I might stay away from Gonzalez. But the last game against Washington, Elliott had 19 DraftKings points, and week 11 he had 8 DraftKings points, but 19 DraftKings points. So I mean, they haven't had trouble moving the ball against Washington. Washington does have a defense that was coming alive towards the end of the season. We got obviously a defensive-minded head coach in Dan Quinn, who was the coach for that that great Dallas defense for several years. But it could be one of those situations, the way that the Eagles have been playing recently, where they're able to move the ball, drive the ball down the field, but then they stall out a little bit in the red zone, which case Jake Elliott would come into play this week again. Obviously, I think with that 19-point performance, like Meg has already mentioned, Pickett was the quarterback in this one, so they weren't able to finish things up when they got in the red zone, and that set up a lot of field goal opportunities. But we could see a similar situation this week if we do have a banged up Jalen Hurts, where they get stalled out a little bit in the red zone, because Hurts, he's hit or miss, and the guy slows down at the end of the season. That's what makes me nervous about this game. He sputters out at the end of the season when they need him the most. He did play well in the Super Bowl a few years ago, but these past few years when they've gotten into the playoffs, we've seen him take a major downturn. And
he's kind of gotten banged up every year at the end of the year, right? Because I remember the 2022 best ball season, the year they went to the Super Bowl, he missed a couple of the best ball playoffs with an injury. I know he was just playing through a lot of stuff, banged up last year, and then concussion against us, week 16, comes back from that and hasn't been, and then now gets the knee injury. So he has really played banged up the last 3 years. I mean, but did come back and have a great postseason that 2022. Obviously, this postseason hasn't been great, but I do wonder with Hurts. And then I did have one question for you about Elliott or the aggressiveness of Philly, but before that game where he got knocked out in week 16 against Washington, he had an awesome game from a passer standpoint against Pittsburgh. Like you said, I think it was a lot of squeaky wheel there, but he threw for about, 280 yards, multiple touchdowns, got AJ Brown going. So, that wasn't that far removed from it, but then he has the concussion, starts not much of a passing game in the playoffs thus far. But then of course, Barkley's just been running wild. And then obviously has the knee injury. So it feels like it feels like one of those massive range of outcomes for Hurts that, I think a lot of people are skeptical of him as a runner, him as a passer. How injured is he? What are we talking? Is he 80%? Is he 50%? And that's something we're truly never going to really know. But like, because I've been burned by that. I remember that I think it was, I don't know, was it 2022 as well? Yeah, the Mahomes, where he got injured in the playoffs. And I was like, I'm not touching Mahomes, and he went nuts in the postseason, So it's like you can kind of see it go either way. That's kind of my take on Hurts is, I don't know. Do you think he'll come in at lower ownership?
I think if he does come in at lower ownership, that's where we take advantage of it. That's where we play the side that, people are overreacting, maybe to his playoff performances and the Barkley situation. If he comes in owned too high, then that's where I think we kind of take the other side and say Hurts, maybe he's more banged up than we think, and maybe he's going to struggle in this one. I'm looking at a captain ownership. Now this is a projection that I don't entirely trust. I don't have my main ownership projections just yet, but I see him projected at 11% in the captain, which is actually a pretty cheap captain price for Hurts if that holds.
Right.
Which would make him interesting as a captain option for us.
What is he looking like potentially for overall ownership?
Overall ownership, let's see. Get an idea of that real quick. Jalen Hurts, I'm seeing him at 42% owned. I'm not sure if that includes the captain ownership, but I would imagine around that 52% total ownership.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, at least that's how it would feel with Hurts. But at the same time, we got all these expensive guys. So, people are going to want to scrap one of these expensive guys. And the way that Hurts is, Hurts is viewed right now as kind of, in that struggle mode and banged up and it's Hurts, people are just kind of down on Hurts right now. And even my commentary on him, just being down on Hurts is going to provide opportunity if it goes too far to the downside on him.
Right. Yeah. No, I just wanted to point out that we're not too far removed from some good passing games from Hurts. Granted, they were before now 2 injuries. So it's, how I think you have to, how healthy do you think he is? Which again, we're not going to know. It's kind of guesswork. And then how owned do you think he is? And if you think could play relatively healthy and still do what he did, say in that Pittsburgh game, and if you do think he's lower owned, I still do like Hurts there. Then to the point about Jake Elliott, do you think, because I mean, in that game when Pickett had to come in, and they did, they moved the ball and they settled for so many field goals. Do you think Sirianni could potentially be more aggressive, knowing how aggressive Dan Quinn in Washington is? Do you think that'll change anything there?
I think that if they do that, the Eagles have a lot of trouble adapting and adjusting. And this is where my concern is with Nakobe Dean, leading to, kind of dominoes falling for this team. And I've talked about this with spread a lot, with the way that this team adjusts to injuries. When they have an injury, I used a couple years ago, they had an injury to their main their main run defender a couple years ago, and they became a complete sieve for running backs. They could not stop running backs at all a couple years ago, and they were just desperately trying to figure out ways to fill those holes, and they just could not adapt to it. And they just struggle to adapt when they have injuries to key key spots. And I think that Nakobe Dean, that's why I keep bringing him up, because I think that that's going to be a major exploitable weakness in the defense. And we saw it, we saw a taste of it last week with Tyler Higbee and Kyren Williams. Even Kyren Williams was running pretty well against them last week. So that's why I think that the Dean, the Eckler and the Ertz calls that you made are really good calls this week, because I do not think that they're going to be able to to adapt to that. And with as far as game plan, I think that Sirianni might be a little gun shy with taking risks because I think that he's still like afraid for his job. You know what I mean? So I think
which is crazy. He's in the NFC. They go to the playoffs every year. He could be potentially playing in the second Super Bowl in however many years. But does feel like the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think that they would prefer to play it conservative and let Washington screw up on fourth down aggressiveness. I don't think that they would necessarily try to be aggressive on fourth downs too. Unless it's like if it's like 1 yard or something like that, then they'll
right. And especially if they feel like especially if they feel Hurts is live for the tush push and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like if Hurts is really injured and they can't do the tush push, then I don't see them being aggressive on fourth down at all.
Right.
Like they're going to go and take the points. And
there's so many factors. It's wild.
And I think that their defense, they have enough confidence in their defense, even with this, even with the injuries that they're dealing with right now, that they would rather let Washington be overly aggressive and have their defense come through with some major stops, because the regression in that fourth down risk taking for Washington, it's going to come around eventually, just like it did for Detroit with some of their risky play calling, which is the reason why when we were doing our best ball show, like I kind of was thinking that Detroit could crumble because the aggressive play calling. And what do? They have freaking Jameson Williams throwing a bomb interception in on a first and 10. So I do think that like the aggressiveness and the we got nothing to lose mentality, it could either be really good for Washington or it could be really bad. But I do think that the Eagles would rather let that play out and see if they screw it up, and trust their defense to to kind of cover for them if that situation happens.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I was just wondering your thought on like Philly's potential aggressiveness in regards to like the kicker and everything. Yeah, that makes sense though.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to like 4th and 5 and making those aggressive calls and stuff, where they could either go for it or have a field goal kicked, I think they'd stick with the field goal because Sirianni doesn't want to rock any boats right now. He wants to, if they lose, he wants to lose outright, or because like something like the other team was being aggressive on fourth down and got lucky or something like that, or the things just swung their way. I don't think that he would want to do anything to cause the loss if they happen to go for it on like a 4th and 5 and they blew it, and then they end up losing the game by 2 points or something,
Right. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. But that's just my read on it. It could end up going like the opposite way. But if we're trying to create our own game script here, I think that, like I would take the kicks. I would guess the kicks over the aggressiveness for the Eagles this week.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So Zane Gonzalez, that same situation, like he, with the team being so aggressive, he's had less opportunities, but he still had double-digit DraftKings points in both weeks of the playoffs so far. But what are your thoughts here on Zane Gonzalez?
I agree with you that because of Washington's aggressive nature, I'm not as interested in Gonzalez. But like you said, he still has gotten there double-digit wise. And with Washington moving the ball, if he does get a couple long kicks, then I'd say I think he's live, but it's definitely not like a priority piece for me. I'd say it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Defenses, any interest in the defenses this week?
Probably just Eagles. I hate to say that as a Washington fan, but if you look at the two, what did they put up against Washington in the first game? I don't know if they got. I thought, they only had 6 in the first game, and then 7 in the second game. So, it hasn't been like a double digit massive, defensive score for Philly, but I do think it's live, especially with, and unfortunately from as a Washington fan perspective, with Sam Cosmi out, the pressures they can get. Jaden Daniels has been awesome, obviously this season, but especially this playoffs, and not taking sacks, not having turnovers. But in the 2 Eagles games, he did have, I believe it was 2 turnovers each game. Let me pull it up real quick to look at Daniels. In the week 16 game, he had 2 interceptions. And in the week 11 game, he had at least 1 interception. I don't know if he had a fumble. And I can't remember, excuse me, how many sacks he took in those games. But yeah, he had one interception in the first game. So he's thrown 3 interceptions in 2 games against the Eagles. Yeah, I'm not sure about his sacks taken in those games. But yeah, with Cosmi out, I'm a little concerned there.
Yeah, it looks like 3 sacks in the first game, and the second game just 1 sack. So
okay,
yeah.
So
yeah, the situation with the Eagles and the Commanders, both those defenses are cheap. We're looking at 3,600 on the Commanders and 4,400 on the Eagles. So I think given their cheapness, like if you want to rotate them in, I think it makes sense. But we got Zaccheaus sitting here right in the middle of these defenses, and he had 2 touchdowns the last time these teams played against each other. But what are your thoughts on Zaccheaus? And let's cover Crowder too while we're at it, because he had 2 touchdowns too.
Yeah, both had 2 touchdowns in that game, and then Terry had 1 in the last Eagles game. Wild to me, like I said, from looking at data and research before going into these games, I was surprised at the. He had run a ton of routes there, weeks, 16, 17, 18. And then his routes have gone way down in the playoffs. And we're talking like from 75% to 50%, something like that. Right. So I'm not really understanding why that is. And maybe because just Diami Brown has run more. I don't know if they've kind of flipped. I've heard people talking that they've used Zaccheaus more as a blocker. Because as you see his game log, he had 2 targets, but a goose egg last week against Detroit, which is, obviously a defense you certainly want to attack. So I don't know. It's if this would be another situation. Like if we're getting low ownership on Zaccheaus, then I'd be interested. But if people are playing him because he's cheap, then I don't know if I'd be interested, because we're going to need him to do what he did on less routes run. So that's what I'd say on that. I'd be interested on his ownership to decide that. Crowder is definitely a stab in the dark. I mean, he's getting, just a handful of targets a game. He did pop in that Philly and Atlanta game for more targets, but usually it's just a handful of targets a game. So I do think the Philly, 2 touchdown game was an outlier game, but again, if you just need as a piece to fit and it's cheap, then, maybe you'll get lucky with a touchdown or, a few catches or something like that. So, I mean, I don't think I'll do it, but I think I would consider Zaccheaus more, but again, more ownership based on how owned he would be.
Yeah. I'm taking a look at Kenny Gainwell real quick. He had 4 targets versus the Giants in week 18, but we weren't playing starters that week. 3 targets for Pittsburgh. Otherwise, he hasn't really been active. Obviously, with Saquon kind of taking over this backfield. So I don't know if I'd have very much interest in Gainwell.
Yeah.
Dotson, we're talking about a revenge game here on Dotson too. No targets last game versus Washington, and prior to that, in the first game, he had 2 targets for 8 yards. So we're looking at scrub territory here.
Mm-hmm.
One guy that might be interesting, $400. Chris Rodriguez. I called him for anytime touchdown in one of my pick 5s for underdog recently, and he hit.
Oh wow,
that was
that's
back.
awesome.
Yeah, that was back in and he jacked that pick 5 up to I think like 100 and something times your money. Like if I think one of the obvious picks in my pick 5 did not hit that week. So the Chris Rodriguez hit, but then the guy that should have hit easily did not hit.
Right.
Sucked.
Right.
and I think that was against Atlanta. So that was in prime time. But
Mhm.
Rodriguez, I did see them bring him out when they got closer to the red zone last week. So Chris Rodriguez, I do think. Let's
But
see.
I think last week McNichols was the one that
Yeah,
got the
McNichols. Yeah,
touchdown.
that's who I'm thinking of. McNichols last week. Yeah, so McNichols might at 2K. What do you think there, Meg?
Yeah, because so far, yeah, it's weird because, like you said, Chris Rodriguez was, had some activity. They do seem to kind of use this third running back sometimes. And like you said, the end of the season was Chris Rodriguez, but I was
Right.
surprised it was McNichols. So I
Yeah.
think McNichols could certainly be in the player pool at 2K. He's going to need to fall in the end zone, though.
Yeah.
Against this Philly defense, it's not like he's going to rack up yards. It's not, he's not really. I don't think he's going to get a ton of targets or something with Eckler active because he was only getting that when Eckler was out.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I think you're going to need what you had last week, and he's going to have to fall in the end zone. So I think I don't see me doing it just because it feels too thin, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, Rodriguez. I think he was just benefiting from Eckler being out, which is probably why he we haven't seen him since week 18. So
right.
All right, Meg. So let's go ahead and build a lineup. Let's do a chalky one first. I think a lot of people are going to want to put Barkley in that captain spot. So
Yeah.
let's try to figure out a way to get cheap in the rest of our lineup. But what kind of script are we envisioning here if we got Saquon Barkley in the captain?
I think if you're doing a chalky Saquon in the captain, you're probably likely fading Hurts, playing Jaden Daniels on the other side, right? Because I think it's too hard to get Barkley, Hurts, and Jaden Daniels. So I would say start there in the chalky build. What are your thoughts on that? And would you then prioritize one of the Eagles receivers?
I think like I'm with you on that one, and I do think that like I would envision the Commanders playing more zone coverage in this one to try to lessen the impact of AJ Brown. But like, let's say for the sake of argument in this one too, we're envisioning like maybe Brown's a little bit banged up, and I like Goddard a lot this week.
Yeah.
I want to put Goddard in this lineup.
Big savings too. If
Yeah.
you're not forcing Devonta Smith or AJ Brown to do Barkley, starting with Barkley, Jaden Daniels, Goddard, then you still have 5.3K. It's not like, because if you do start Barkley, Jaden Daniels, AJ Brown, you're really, hamstrung there.
Yeah, exactly. And we like Eckler and Ertz, but do you have a preference on which of those guys you want to put in first?
I'm leaning towards Eckler, but I do really like Ertz. So either one for me, but I'm leaning towards Eckler.
Cool. Let's get them both in. Let's see what that does for us.
Okay, I like that.
4,400 is what it would leave us with. That puts us in Eagles defense. Correlates obviously with Barkley, Zacchaeus, Commanders. I don't hate any of those options, honestly. Like with a build
same.
like this.
I actually really like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think the one with Eagles and kind of, using most of your salary will be very chalky?
I think so. Like, I think the Zacchaeus is going to be, he's going to be low owned probably. Like he's burned me the last couple times because I like, I've been recommending him like the last couple weeks, and it's been Diami Brown who's taken over. Obviously, we talked about that, but Zacchaeus I think would be an option. I think it's a rotation situation where you put like one lineup with the Eagles, one with Zacchaeus, one with the Commanders, and then maybe do one with Crowder, like we were talking about earlier,
and then leaving salary on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I like that a lot. I actually really like that a lot because you're just, telling the story that, it still could be an Eagles win. I mean, I think this is a story where Washington is either, maybe wins competitive, but you're still telling the story that, Eagles could certainly still win in this game, but it's dominated by, Barkley, Goddard, kind of the best matchups there. And then the Eagles defense, I really do like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good route to go, and it leaves us with decent options at that last spot. And I don't feel like we're missing any. I don't like McLaurin. for 9,400 and he could struggle. Brown for 9,800, he could struggle. Hurts, potentially hurt. And Devontae Smith, like I don't feel like we're killing ourselves not having him in there either. So
right.
yeah.
Right.
All
No,
right,
I like that a lot.
Let's clear this one out. Let's go with one of our your cheap guys that we want to put in the captain. Meg, you do this one. You lead the way on this one.
All right, let's I'll go ahead and let's start Eckler in the captain then.
Okay.
And then on that, I assume still be fine with Barkley in the flex.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Eckler, Barkley leaves 7,200. I guess I would lean still because it would be hard to get both quarterbacks. You could do it, but it's going to make it thinner. So I would lean Jaden Daniels. So Eckler, Barkley, Jaden Daniels leaves you 5.9.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'd go back to a similar build unless you want to mix something up. Where I'd probably, if you went Goddard, now that kind of puts you in a, it puts you in a decent range of 6.1K per player for the last two. So yeah, it's kind of a similar build, just leaving kind of more on the table, or leaving more room with your last two picks. So with that one, I'm trying to think here. I'm just curious. Oh no, yeah, you definitely can't do Hurts. What do you like? Do you like going like Philly kicker, and then it just takes you to the Brian Robinson range, which I don't love, especially with Eckler.
I think if we went with Philly kicker, that leaves us with 7,200. We could go Brian Robinson, but obviously with Eckler.
Yeah, I don't love that with Eckler.
Yeah, like I think if we have Eckler in the captain, it's because we're thinking that like there's going to be less of a more of a situation where Eckler's kind of taking over that backfield. So let's see. Yeah, I think if we did Elliott, we could put I'd probably put Ertz in there and leave money on the table. I think that would probably be my preferred way to go with that one. But what do you think?
So what does that leave on the? Okay, I see. So yeah, it would make it certainly unique because you're leaving 2K on the table. I'm gonna backtrack a little, tell a different story here. What if we did do, AJ Brown? What does that? So that leaves 4K, and then if you did, oh no, I was gonna say if you did like Zacchaeus, but then you're not able to get. Oh no, you could get one of.
You think Zacchaeus instead of Elliott?
I was just trying to see if like AJ Brown, Zacchaeus, that leaves 4,000. Then it just puts you in the Commanders defense rank. Because what's Eagles? Yeah, Eagles are 4,400. Yeah. I don't know if I love that either.
let's try Ertz in the captain. Let's try swapping him out. Swapping Eckler out for Ertz. If we put Ertz in the captain, and we got Barkley, Daniels, who we know are going to be the two safest scores here. We got Goddard in there. Leaves us with 7K per guy. Now, if we take this and we go with Jeez, my kid's losing his mind down there. If we do that, Goddard, we can put in. What am I missing here? Like, let's put Elliott in this one. Just see where it gets us. That leaves us in Devontae Smith.
Yeah. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
Because then you're getting Barkley, Goddard, Elliott, Devontae Smith. So then it's a 4-2 or it's a 2-4. But Ertz in the captain. I do think that's unique, but still, getting a lot of basically you're not getting AJ Brown or Jalen Hurts, but you're getting potential. A lot of the rest of the Eagles scoring.
Yeah, exactly. And let's say like Daniels throws 3 touchdowns to Ertz in this situation. Um, like, I mean, the one thing is like it takes out our Eckler play.
Right. Right.
But if we wanted to put Eckler in, at least it's 7,600. I mean, that just keeps putting us in that Brian Robinson situation.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
we don't want to put them
Yeah.
both in
Which
the
I
same
don't love.
lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly. I don't love that.
yeah.
Um,
Let's try Goddard in that captain. I think is Goddard cheaper than Ertz? No, he's more
uh,
expensive than Ertz.
oh, okay.
But I like that Ertz direction with Devontae Smith as that final spot. But I do feel like we need to get uh, Eckler or Brian Robinson in this week, like just because I think that Philly's going to be vulnerable against the run this week, and I do think that I'm with you. Like Eckler, we're talking about with Eckler, we're talking about a veteran who
Hmm.
came from like a shitty Chargers team, right? He's going to be playing like his heart out in this game, Like
Right.
this could be his last shot, like at a Super Bowl. So, and he's a veteran player, like he's one of those, like types of guys that has overcome a lot to get to where he is. A lot of people wrote him off coming into this season. I happen to like him
Yeah.
coming to Washington. I thought it was a good landing spot for him. But he's come alive towards the end of the season. He had that concussion, but I really feel that he is going to have a good game in this one. And I really think that we, whichever direction that we go in, we probably want to have at least one variation with Eckler in it. So if we went with let's put Ertz back in the captain. Let's go with let's get Goddard in there. These are the 7,600. If we have Eckler in the flex, I don't hate doubling up on the running back as much if I have Eckler in the flex,
Hmm.
because it's like they're taking away their captain points away from each other, but they still have the potential to both have decent games. But like I definitely would prefer Eckler, but it definitely puts us in that tricky spot where like we're kind of in that situation where we're forced to put in those 2 running backs. But
Yeah.
if we swap out like Daniels for Hurts, what does that do for us? Still, it's still in that same spot. It's just like such a
Right.
tricky
You're not
price
saving too
range.
much. One
Yeah.
one variation that I just got by
Mhm.
still keeping Devonta Smith, but getting rid of Goddard was Ertz in the Kaplan. Excuse me, Ertz, Jaden Daniels, Eckler from Washington,
Mhm.
Barkley, Devonta Smith, Eagles. It zeroes it out, but I do think. I mean, I got to believe that Ertz captain is going to be incredibly low ownership.
Yeah.
So so at least you're getting the low ownership, really low ownership there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the rest of the other 5 pieces aren't, not getting many contrarian spots there, but I don't mind that just from like the game script is again, either it could honestly, and this could be either Eagles are, Eagles win, Washington's competitive, Washington win. Just,
Yeah.
I think because it's not like a 5-1 or, so I do still like that because you're getting the 2 guys underneath that we liked with Jaden Daniels. You're getting Barkley, you're getting one of the Eagles receivers, and then the Eagles defense, which again, we talked about, like certainly could be a bigger threat with Cosme out this week.
Yeah. And if you wanted to, swap guys in, you got Zacchaeus, you got Commander's
Right.
D, that you
Right.
could also put in, and even Crowder. Like Crowder could
Right.
be another, leave some salary on the table type. But yeah,
Right.
Ertz, Eckler, and Goddard, I think are going to be my favorite captains this week. Meg, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly did really like the Barkley lineup we built.
Yeah.
But I do like the Ertz, Eckler, or Goddard captains just because I assume you're going to get a lot of ownership leverage from the captain spot. Like I assume all those options would be less than 5% owned in the captain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm seeing on on my current projections. I'm seeing them all under 5%. I'd be interested in seeing where we get when we're closer to to Sunday, just because I do think that this is one of those slates where you have to go cheap at captain. And this is why I picked like Likely the other day, and he ended
Right.
up hitting and being the right captain. But
Right.
in these types of games, when we go cheap at captain and we're able to get like those other studs in there, like
Right.
we still have a lot of upside with our captain in Ertz, Eckler, or Goddard. We still
Right.
have a lot of upside there, and we're able to pack in a lot of floor with the rest of our lineup when we go in that direction. And
Right.
ultimately that can separate us in this type of game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I like the like you said, how you did with Likely last week, and the cheaper and lower own, captain this week. Still force, making sure you're getting Barkley, one of the quarterbacks, and then taking advantage of still working in, Eckler, Ertz, or Goddard in the flex. So I like that a lot.
Awesome. All right, Meg, do you have any final thoughts on this game, or any final things that you wanna talk about with FanSpeak?
No, it should be fun. Again, just excited. Washington's back in the mix. Hopefully, the future's bright. Hopefully we have just a fun conference championship Sunday. Profitable one as well would be nice. Check out fanspeak.com, Fanspeak Network on YouTube, and look for, if you're into best ball, missing best ball, ready to get back in the best ball streets, whether it's in the big board this spring or, when all the contests launch on Underdog Fantasy after the NFL draft, we will have you covered on fanspeak.com and Fanspeak Network.
Awesome. And make sure to hit that like button. Give me the 30 likes so I can put my picks in the comment section when we get closer to lock. Been hitting on these captains lately. We just talked about Likely. I had him both times that he went off in the captain spot. Also had who was it? Who's the Ricky Pearsall a couple weeks
Wow.
ago.
Yeah,
And
that was
he
massive.
hit big for us. Yeah, he hit big for us on that one. So likes, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Get us to 1,800 or 1,700, whatever it was, by the end of conference championships. I only needed about like 80 to get there. So appreciate the help with that. You want to subscribe anyways to get the updates when these videos come out. They come out at all sorts of random times. So I don't really have a set schedule. So you want to get the alerts, and you got to do that by subscribing to the channel. And other than that, thanks for joining me, Meg. And see you guys later on.